We have had all of the precursors basically announce their nominations. We've seen the results of the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards, and now the Oscar nominations are only a few days away. Like you, I am so excited to see what they announce as the official Academy Award nominations for such an amazing year of cinema. And I am going to do my absolute best to predict these nominations. So let's get into it. I'm not predicting wins yet. This is just in order of what is most likely to get a nomination versus what I think is least likely to get a nomination out of basically the remaining contenders. So starting off with Best Picture, I have Oppenheimer at number one. It has basically swept everywhere. It has not missed a beat. It got the final BAFTA nomination, which has been snubbed everywhere. I don't know how much that's going to count because voting had closed well and truly before those nominations came out, but Oppenheimer has made it everywhere, so I think it's very strong. Poor Things at number two, I think, has done really well, and at times it has done better than what I had anticipated for such a strange film. Don't get me wrong, I'm pretty excited about this, but I am a little bit surprised that it has fared so strong, and because of that, I think it is a lock. Killers of the Flower Moon next, I just think it's just a behemoth. Martin Scorsese's film. It has once again not really missed anywhere. There were a couple of shocking snubs at the BAFTAs, but I don't think that's going to affect it. I really think here that going through this list that the PGA 10 is the official Academy Awards 10 or what it's going to look like because these films just seem like the type of ones that get nominated and it's not a bad lineup. Number four, I have Barbie. Apart from a BAFTA miss, it has really exceeded a lot of expectations. It has been probably the most nominated film at a lot of these award shows with those song categories just really blowing it out of proportion. I don't know if it's going to be the most nominated film at the Academy Awards this year, but it'll definitely be up there. Number five, The Holdovers. This has been really strong too. At the beginning of award season, I was very adamant that I did not believe in The Holdovers doing that well. But I have been proven wrong. The film is really, really great, and it has just gone from strength to strength. And there's some interesting races where it could potentially upset. So it is quite strong. Number six, Anatomy of a Fall. A lot of people have this at around 9 or 10, maybe scraping by, because I think it missed just a couple of things like the Critics' Choice, which just snubbed a lot of foreign films. Anatomy of a Fall, though, is just so strong. It is just as much of a contender as the other five, I think, because it just really just keeps going from strength to strength. And there is a package for it to just really get into Best Picture quite easily. Number seven, American Fiction, another film that just doesn't really miss. And I'm a little bit shocked because from what I've heard about this film, I hear it's pretty great, but not best of the year or anything. And lo and behold, it just keeps popping up. That win at the Toronto International Film Festival proved really big for it. Number eight, I have Past Lives. This is missed here and there, but I think it's done just enough to get into Best Picture. Nine, Maestro. Now, this is probably a little bit lower than what some people may have it because it just hasn't really missed in too many places. It did miss at BAFTA, but it has done really well, but there's just something about it that just makes me think that it could potentially get snubbed. I think that Maestro will have a couple of snubs here and there that I just have a feeling that it just might not get everything that it has everywhere else. The reception of it is quite divided. I know some people really love it and people really appreciate what Bradley Cooper's done with this film. But then there's another crowd that just hates this movie, and I think that's going to play a part in the Academy Awards voting. Number 10, I have The Zone of Interest. I really think these 10 are pretty much locked in. I don't really see The Zone of Interest missing. I think it's done just enough to get in here. Number 11, The Color Purple. This has just missed in far too many places. I guess it could upset, and if it was going to do it anywhere, it could be here. It did get in at the Critics' Choice and at SAG with Best Ensemble, but it didn't really fare too well there. It got snubbed in a lot of spots. 12, Saltburn. I would be pretty happy if this got in, but I know film Twitter especially would be so pissed that this got in. I think, though, it just hasn't done enough, and it's too divided. 13, May December just has not done enough. I think this is a film that a lot of people really expected more from in terms of awards contention, and it just keeps missing, and it's a bit of a shame because it's a fantastic film. 14, I Have Air. I really think this has no chance of getting in. 15, All of Us Strangers. Like Best Picture, I'm actually quietly confident in what I have for Best Director. Number 1, I have Christopher Nolan. That's really expected here. Once again, sweeping everywhere. Number 2, Yorgos Lanthimos. Now, he did miss BAFTA, but he's gotten in everywhere else. He's got the DGA, he's got the Critics' Choice and the Golden Globes. And I think it's just be really strange if Poor Things got in pretty much everywhere that has been and then it misses out on director, because it is such a director's vision. 3, Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. I think it'd be really hard for him to miss out here. He's definitely getting a nomination. 4, I know a lot of people have been talking that this could be a snub, and I don't really see why Greta Gerwig would be. She made it in at the Golden Globes, she made it at the Critics' Choice, and she made it at the DGA. She just missed out on BAFTA, where the film just underperformed. The British did not like Barbie as much as America, clearly. But I do think that Greta Gerwig is going to be in here. There was a lot of controversy when she got snubbed for Little Women, and I think that does play a little bit of a part for her getting in. Even though I do think she gets in basically on merit anyway. Barbie was such a massive hit, and she kind of became more of a household name because of this movie. So I really don't see her missing here. 5, I have Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest instead of Bradley Cooper for Maestro. And that's for 2 reasons. The first is that the Academy always nominate an international director. In the last 5 or 6 years, they've consistently done it when no one kind of expected them to. And now it's kind of become a really expected thing. So I really think there's going to be nothing different here. I think Jonathan Glazer is the one that they go with instead of Justine Triet, because I hear The Zone of Interest is just such a director's vision. I still haven't seen the movie. I wish I could, but it's really hard to find a screening for it. 6, I have Bradley Cooper, and going into the second reason is because he got snubbed for A Star Is Born, which was a much more well-loved movie. I know Maestro is a lot more technically proficient probably than A Star Is Born, but A Star Is Born has a lot of emotion to it that makes it very easy to connect with an audience member, while Maestro doesn't really have that as much. So I do think that Bradley Cooper is going to miss here. 7, Alexander Payne for The Holdovers. He's actually done quite well for himself. Even seeing The Holdovers, I don't really see it as a director's movie. It's more of a writer's movie to me. But he has gotten in at Critics' Choice, DGA, and BAFTA, so he has done quite well for himself. But I don't think he gets in at the Oscar 5. 8, Celine Song for Past Lives. This dream is over. I think Past Lives will get in a number of categories, including Best Picture, but I don't think Celine Song makes the cut. She got in at the Golden Globes, and that's really it. We're going to call it a day here. Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. While the BAFTA nomination was a surprise, I don't really see her getting into Best Director here, because, once again, Anatomy of a Fall strikes me more of a writer's movie than a director's movie. 10, Todd Haynes for May December. Kind of a wish list pick, I guess. He's not making it in. He hasn't done anything. It's not happening. Best Actor, and wow, we have a race on our hands, and I do have some picks that are kind of going against kind of what's been going on lately in the recent momentum. But going into it, I have Cillian Murphy at number 1 for Oppenheimer, just getting in everywhere he needs to. No shocks here. He's a contender to win the thing. The other contender to win is Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers. I really didn't expect him to kind of become more likely to get a nomination and a win than Bradley Cooper, who has just been making it everywhere, campaigning his ass off. But Paul Giamatti has been campaigning a lot too, in a sense that makes him a lot more likable. Well, with Bradley Cooper, a lot of people are kind of getting sick and tired of him, the way he's campaigning. even though he's really, really going for it, and I kind of appreciate that. But he has won both the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice, and he beat out Cillian Murphy for that. So that is a massive, massive upset. I think the tide will change and Cillian Murphy will once again establish himself as the front runner. But Paul Giamatti has made himself a really strong contender. Bradley Cooper in at 3 hasn't really won anything, but he is making it in for these nominations. I kind of expect something similar. He'll get nominated and probably won't win. 4, Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. He's just been making it in everywhere as well, except for BAFTA. But he's done enough, I think. 5, I'm going with Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon because it's Leonardo DiCaprio. He's been nominated many times at the Academy Awards, and a very long string of his performances keep getting nominated. His last one in Don't Look Up didn't get nominated, but that film was very divisive, and even as someone who does like that film, it was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's weaker performances over the last 10-15 years where he's just been an absolute juggernaut. I do think Killers of the Flower Moon is a lot stronger of a movie technically than Don't Look Up, and his performance is a lot stronger. So I just find it really weird that he would miss. And I remember when this film came out, so many people were saying that this is Leo's best performance. So where has this crowd gone? I've heard nothing from them since. I just find it really weird that he's going to miss. I do think he's done enough, though, to get in. Despite not campaigning at all, I do think he might beat out Coleman Domingo for Rustin. I just don't think the movie is strong enough to really bolster him up, even though he hasn't missed a beat. Number 7, I have Barry Keoghan for Saltburn. He's been doing fairly well for himself, showing up in places that I didn't really expect him to. So really good props for Barry Keoghan for really getting a couple of nominations, but I don't think he gets in at the Academy Awards this year. Andrew Scott for All of Us Strangers. It's pretty much a wrap. He's been snubbed everywhere, including the BAFTAs, which nominated the fuck out of All of Us Strangers. So Andrew Scott is kind of dead in the water to me. 9, Zac Efron for The Iron Claw. One can dream. This movie just hasn't done anything. It's been pretty much dead in the water. But there is just some small chance where the Academy see it and are impressed enough by it that he just becomes this shock nomination out of nowhere. The Academy Awards have nominated performances that don't get nominated anywhere. That could be the case here, although I find it very unlikely. Matt Damon for Air, please. It's not happening. Best Actress, I probably need to rethink who my frontrunner is, but number 1 I have Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon. She has been so strong, and I think ever since awards season started kicking into place, I just found it really hard not to believe that she wouldn't get in and wouldn't be a strong contender for the win. For the longest time, I thought she was the front runner because it would be a big historic moment for the Academy Awards, and I find it very hard to believe that they'll pass up on that. Even though I think number 2, Emma Stone, is a probably stronger performance to me personally, and she might be the front runner because she's been winning everything. Lily Gladstone lost to Emma Stone kind of shockingly to me at the Critics' Choice, and then she got snubbed at the BAFTAs. That was kind of insane to me. Emma Stone, however, has not missed a beat, has been winning consistently, has a great campaign behind her. A lot of people love her. I think she's a phenomenal actress, and she might be in for her second Oscar here. Number 3, Margot Robbie for Barbie. People still seem to think that she might get snubbed, and then she just keeps popping up and popping up and popping up. Guys, it's not happening. Margot Robbie is getting a nomination for Barbie. There is no way that in the Barbie movie that the person that plays Barbie does not get a nomination. It would be very bizarre. I think that she's number 3. She hasn't missed a beat. She's been nominated everywhere. Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, SAG, BAFTA. Sure, she hasn't won, but she keeps turning up. Despite being nominated in some bodies like the BAFTAs that under-nominated Barbie, she still made it in. So I do think she's really strong. Not a contender to win, but definitely a lock for a nomination. 4, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall. I think it's happening. I think Anatomy of a Fall has kind of overcome the weight of not being submitted by France. So I do think it's quite strong, and I do think Sandra Hüller is getting a nomination. 5, look, I'm taking a very risky pick here, but I think Greta Lee might just sneak in for Past Lives, and it'd be a great moment. Sometimes the Academy don't always go for the big, loud performances that have a massive Oscar campaign behind them. Sometimes they go for something a little more nuanced and quiet, and this feels like the perfect scenario where this might happen. They might prefer a performance like Greta Lee's over Carey Mulligan's. I just think that Maestro overall is going to underperform, and this is going to be a category where it might get snubbed, even though Carey Mulligan has gotten in everywhere and Greta Lee has missed in a couple of spots. I do think she might get it in. 7, Annette Bening for Nyad. This isn't happening. This better not happen. If this actually happens and Annette Bening gets in for Nyad, I swear to God, I lose faith. I completely lose faith. What I've seen of Nyad, I couldn't even finish the movie. I've seen like 30 minutes of it and I was bored out of my mind. The performance is not compelling. It is just typical sports movie stuff, and I'm a fan of that genre. I love that genre, but it just isn't that strong of a movie. It's not that strong of a performance. She did rock up at Golden Globes and SAG, but it's kind of that thing where those performances do rock up in some of those precursors and then completely miss. You think Eddie Redmayne in The Good Nurse, he got right up to the end and we all kind of were starting to think that he's getting in at the Oscars, and then boom, he missed. And I think that happens with Annette Bening. 8, Kaylee Spaney for Priscilla. I would love this performance to get a nomination. I think it was a fantastic performance. But apart from the Golden Globes nomination, she hasn't rocked up anywhere, so I don't really see it happening. Fantasia Barrino for The Color Purple. She got in that Golden Globe and BAFTA. She kind of needed that BAFTA nomination to give her some kind of hope. But I still don't really think it's happening. It's just been too weak. The Color Purple just hasn't gotten quite what it needed to. 10, I have Anjanou Ellis Taylor. She hasn't turned up anywhere, but she's kind of doing a campaign similar to Andrea Riseborough from To Leslie, and that kind of came out of nowhere and got her a nomination. So we could be something similar here with Origin. It doesn't feel as strong, but I've just heard little whispers here and there, and if this rocks up as a nomination, I will be shocked, but we need to kind of start taking that sort of campaign very seriously. Best Supporting Actor, I'm pretty confident in this lineup. So we have Robert Downey Jr. sweeping everywhere. Don't really need to talk about it. Ryan Gosling getting it everywhere. Robert De Niro getting it everywhere. There's no shocks. Now, when we get 4 down is where we start to see a pretty tight race for those last 2 slots. Mark Ruffalo looked really strong at first, getting in at the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, and then he just started missing. He missed the BAFTA, and he missed the SAG nomination, which was kind of crazy, but I still think he gets in at the Academy Awards. It was a strong enough performance. He's been nominated before. I just don't really see a world where he gets snubbed. Number 5, I have Willem Dafoe as well for Poor Things, and I'm putting both the Poor Things boys in here because The Favourite had 2 nominations in a supporting category as well. And I do tend to think that Poor Things might be a stronger movie and almost a stronger contender for Best Picture than The Favourite, even though that was quite strong at the time. I do think these 2 get in. Charles Melton for May December, I'm sorry, it's just not happening. He hasn't popped up anywhere. I think it's over. 7, Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction. He could come in and nab a slot, but once again, I just don't see it happening. Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe getting nominations just make a lot more sense to me than a Charles Melton or a Sterling K. Brown. 8, Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers. This is just a first performance, a breakthrough performance in film, even though he's had a pretty long career in theatre, I've heard. He got the BAFTA nomination. That was a pretty big win for him. I just don't see it happening with the Academy Awards. 9, Coleman Domingo for The Color Purple, not really happening. And 10, Paul Mescal for All of Us Strangers. He got the BAFTA nom, congratulations, but I just think it ends here. I don't think he's going to have the same success that he did with Aftersun. Best Supporting Actress, I have Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. No shocks again. Emily Blunt getting in at number 2 for Oppenheimer. Danielle Brooks getting in for The Color Purple. hasn't missed a beat. Penelope Cruz for Ferrari. This is where the shocks come in, I think. Now, Penelope Cruz got in for Parallel Mothers a number of years ago, and that was kind of a shock too. And I feel like Ferrari has been seen by a little bit more wider of an audience, so I think more eyes have seen this performance, and it is a standout of that movie. So I do think that the Academy's love for Penelope Cruz gets her in at Oscars in terms of a nomination. She got the SAG nom. That was kind of all I needed to see. I need to see her show up somewhere, and she did. So I'm pretty convinced that she gets in. 5, I have Julianne Moore for May December. Now, she's been missing in spots too, but I think this is where it shows up. She will show up at the Academy Awards, I think, because I don't think Jodie Foster for Nyad gets in, even though she has been popping up in spots. I once again think it's a similar situation to Eddie Redmayne in The Good Nurse, or Jared Leto. It's just not going to happen, I think. I think she just misses out here. 7, America Ferrera for Barbie. Now, there is a possibility here, maybe, because everyone keeps talking about the monologue that she has and how it's so groundbreaking. And that might be enough to get her in, but I just don't think she's won enough to get her through. 8, Rosamund Pike for Saltburn. She's been popping up in a number of spots too, and I love the performance, but I think the Academy is going to find Saltburn a little bit too weird, and I just don't see it popping up in a lot of spots. Sandra Hüller for The Zone of Interest. I don't think she's getting double nominated. They're going to praise her for Anatomy of a Fall, and that'll be it. 10, Taraji P. Henson for The Color Purple. She could have got in with a stronger campaign, maybe, but her campaign has been kind of awful. She's been drawing a lot of negative press, I've seen, and that is enough to deter a nomination. I know we should be looking at it in terms of merit, but that's not how it works, unfortunately. Okay, this is where we get some chaos. Both screenplay categories I just can't figure out for the life of me. Mainly original screenplay. I think adapted screenplay has its 5 and it's locked in, but original screenplay is going to be pretty chaotic. I think that's where you're going to see a surprise nomination, and that's what I have here. Anatomy of a Fall is my frontrunner. It has been so strong. It has been winning awards. I think that it is a really big contender to win. Number 2, The Holdovers. It's definitely getting in. I think it's strong enough. Past Lives is definitely getting in. It's one of its strongest categories where it keeps popping up. Number 4, I have May December. It hasn't been popping up in too many spots, but I think there is a chance. There is a chance where it gets in here. It's a very righty movie, and I think the Academy might look at these screenplay categories more for merit than their campaign, more than other categories. So I do think May December gets in here. And they're known to nominate some stuff that doesn't really pop up in a lot of other places. So I think it's possible. 5, going for that shock nomination, I think Saltburn might get in, because even though Saltburn might be a little bit too strange, too divisive for the Academy, I think they like Emerald Fennell. Promising Young Woman was kind of divisive too, even though it was a little bit stronger in terms of critical acclaim than Saltburn. And that's why Promising Young Woman won original screenplay. I think Saltburn might just do enough to get a nomination, and that's it. That might be the only spot where Saltburn shows up. 6, going for another shock here, The Iron Claw. Just being that out of nowhere pick that just really shocks a lot of people. There are some nominations at the Academy Awards that really just take you for a ride. You just don't see it coming. And that's what makes them so special, because they usually pick some really great stuff. Not always, but they do pick some really great stuff, and some stuff just comes out of nowhere, and this could be one of them. 7, I have Maestro, because even though it's been popping up in a few spots, I don't really see it. Like, me personally, having seen the movie, it's more of a directing achievement than a screenplay one. I think the writing for Maestro is one of the weakest elements to that movie, and I feel like Academy voters might have some similar divisiveness, and it might be enough to knock it down. I just think Maestro might underperform a little bit at the Academy Awards, and this will be a category where it just doesn't show up. 8, Air, I don't think it's happening. 9 and 10 are kind of dream picks. Asteroid City, if that showed up for Best Original Screenplay, that'd be amazing. I only have it in my 10 because I'm holding out hope that it might have gotten a WGA nomination like The French Dispatch did. but we'll never know because the WGA will be happening after the Academy Awards. And Dream Scenario, a truly original screenplay, a great idea. I would love this if this got a nomination, but I don't see it happening. For Best Adapted Screenplay, I think the 5 that I have is it. I don't think it's going to deviate that much. Killers of the Flower Moon has been getting in kind of where it needs to. It missed at BAFTA because it underperformed, but it's not going to miss at the Academy Awards. Barbie is definitely getting in. Poor Things definitely getting in. American Fiction won a Critics' Choice Award. I don't see it missing. And Oppenheimer, even though I have it at 5, is a lock at 5. I don't think anything is knocking out these 5. If something were to knock out these 5, it would be 6 or 7. So All of Us Strangers, it got a Critics' Choice nomination and a BAFTA nomination. If they really love the movie, I guess you could say it could get in. But I just don't see it happening unless it kind of overperforms a little bit and gets a low nomination, kind of like Aftersun did last year. And then the Zone of Interest. I see it more of a director's achievement than a writing achievement. So that's why I'm predicting it for director rather than screenplay. Apart from a couple of additional categories, I kind of see the Zone of Interest similar to Triangle of Sadness last year, where it just pops in enough categories to get a Best Picture nomination, and that's it. So I think it misses screenplay. 8, Priscilla. Maybe they love Sofia Coppola enough to give her a nomination. I don't see it happening. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. A lot of people want this nomination or a Rachel McAdams nomination. I don't see it happening. I just don't think the film drew enough attention, even though it did get a Critics' Choice nomination. And The Color Purple hasn't gone in anywhere, and this is probably one of its weakest categories. Best International Feature, I'm really just going to talk about the 5 here because I really don't think there's going to be too many shocks here because the precursors have been all pretty obvious as to where they're all going. The Academy Awards might shock, maybe. Decision to Leave was a massive frontrunner last year and then it missed at the Oscars, and that was a massive shame. I don't know if they're going to repeat that this year. The 5 that I have is the Zone of Interest, been making it in everywhere, and with Anatomy of a Fall and Past Lives out, I think the Zone of Interest is now the front runner. I think that's what everyone has thought would happen, and I think that's going to be the case. Number 2, I have Society of the Snow. That has been getting in everywhere. They're the 2 international movies that have popped up everywhere that are eligible for an Academy Award nomination here that have been submitted by their country. Society of the Snow has also been doing gangbusters on Netflix. It has drawn in, I think, the most out of any international film on the platform. I could be wrong there, but it is way up there. So a lot of people have seen this movie. It has done really, really well. So it might give the Zone of Interest some competition. But with the Zone of Interest getting a Best Picture nomination, it's going to make it obvious who's going to win this category. Number 3, I have Fallen Leaves. I think the Golden Globes nomination was enough to get it in. 4 Perfect Days. People really love Koji Yakushi's performance, and the film has done really well critically. It got a Critics' Choice nomination. I think that's all it needs. And 5, I have The Taste of Things. This is France's submission over Anatomy of a Fall, and people do like the movie enough that I think it does get a nomination. But guess what, France? Because you didn't nominate Anatomy of a Fall as your movie, you're going to miss out on an Oscar on this category. So good decision making there. Best Animated Feature, I'm not really doing anything different here. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the most likely to get a nomination. I think it has made it in everywhere. It is the front runner. It has done incredibly well. It is an amazing piece of animation. So really no surprises here that it's a top contender. Next, The Boy and the Heron. These 2 movies are just making it in everywhere. It would be pretty crazy though if The Boy and the Heron ended up beating Spider-Verse. There is a chance that it does for the Oscars, being Miyazaki's potentially last film. That could be a big, compelling piece to really convince voters to give him the Oscar over the Spider-Verse filmmakers that are still due to make one more film. 3, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. It has missed in a couple spots, but I don't think it'll miss at the Academy Awards. Elemental, I think, will get in. A lot of people were saying it could be disastrous for Pixar if Elemental doesn't get an Academy Award nomination. I just don't see it missing. It did just enough to scrape by, I think, in getting in 5, I have Nimona. The Annies really convinced me that Nimona does have just enough, I think, to get in at the Academy Awards, because I don't think Suzume is getting in due to the Academy's bias against anime. Sure, Ghibli films get in every now and then. Spirited Away won an Academy Award, but a lot of anime films just never get in, despite how acclaimed they are, despite how well liked they are. And I think we're going to be seeing the same thing with Suzume. I do think it's going to miss. Wish has not done enough. It was a Golden Globes thing. It got in at the Critics' Choice. It had a decent run, but I don't think it has done enough. I just think it misses. Same thing with the Super Mario Brothers movie. I did think for a long time that it was going to get in, being a highly, highly profitable movie, but it's definitely not the be-all and end-all. And the Golden Globes almost had me convinced, and then from then on, it has pretty much missed everywhere. And it felt kind of weird seeing it lined up against some really spectacular pieces of animation. So I don't think Mario's getting in. Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget, the BAFTAs gave it its props. That was expected. It's a British movie with British comedy. Of course it was going to go down that way. And even though these movies have infamously done quite well at the Academy Awards, I do think this one might miss. And 10, no chance in hell, Trolls Band Together. I just threw an animated movie on this list. For Best Documentary, it's really hard to pinpoint nominations because even though a lot of the precursors are doing their own thing and things are popping up and getting nominations, when it comes to the Academy Awards, they just go off on a tangent and do their own thing. There'll be something that you think is definitely the favorite and it's probably going to win the thing, and then doesn't even get a nomination. It's always shocking. It's kind of crazy how wild they are, the documentary brands. But these are the 5 that I have. So number 1, Beyond Utopia. I've heard a lot of great things about this film. I almost could have seen this at the Brisbane International Film Festival, but I had a clash. It was very sad. But I'm hearing amazing things and it's doing quite well. 2, the only documentary that I have really seen this year, and I'm pretty confident that it will be my favorite documentary of the year, American Symphony. I will be so happy if this gets an Academy Award nomination. My reaction is going to be incredible if this gets a nomination. I really hope it does. John Baptiste's story here is utterly tremendous, and what he went through alongside his wife Suleika was just monumental, and the way this film communicates that was so moving that I'm really hoping it does get a nomination, and I do think it has the quality to back it up. Number 3, 20 Days in Mariupol. I have heard that this is just a really great documentary. It is a potential contender in the international category, so I think it does have enough to get into the documentary category. Number 4, Four Daughters. I don't know, it just keeps popping up. Number 5, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni project. This just seems like the type of thing that gets in. I am snubbing still a Michael J. Fox movie, even though that has popped up in a lot of spots. And that's because sometimes these celebrity documentaries just don't do very well unless they're done in a very different way. And from what I've heard for this movie, it's a very emotional tale, kind of like American Symphony, I guess. But it just kind of strikes me as a very just celebrity-centric documentary, even if it is emotional and heartfelt. Best editing, this one is almost pretty locked up as well. We have Oppenheimer as the front runner. I think Oppenheimer is going to dominate a lot of technical categories. Killers of the Flower Moon is probably definitely going to show up as well. The Irishman did all those years ago, so it wouldn't shock me if Killers does. Barbie, I think, does get in there just as a package for its whole best picture chances. Poor Things, I think, gets in there, as well as Maestro. Now, Air and Anatomy of a Fall could show up potentially, but I really think that those 5 are really strong contenders, and a real dream pick for me would be The Killer. I think that is the best editing of the year, so if that got a nomination, I'd be so psyched. Similar story for Best Cinematography. I think Oppenheimer is a lock for a nomination. Killers of the Flower Moon is definitely a lock as well. I think Maestro is as well. We have had the ASC nominations, and I think 4 out of the 5 ASC nominations are going to get in. So Oppenheimer, Killers, Maestro, and Poor Things. However, I think Barbie beats out the other ASC nominee, El Conde. Al Conde could show up. The Academy love black and white, so it wouldn't be shocking if it does get a nomination. But I just think that Barbie is such a heavyweight contender that I think it will just come with a package. But I am expecting a little bit of a shock there. For visual effects, we've pretty much had all of the guilds and categories be nominated and decided here. So for visual effects, I think The Creator is definitely a lock for a nomination and probably the front runner. And surprisingly, I think Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse might be a lock as well. It's very strange that an animated movie gets in for visual effects, but because that film is so visually impressive and does have a prominent use of visual effects, I think it does get in, and the Critics' Choice and the Visual Effects Society nominations were big for it. At 3, I actually have Godzilla Minus One, despite the fact that it hasn't really gotten in anywhere. It's kind of a stab in the dark, but sometimes the Academy don't do everything that all the precursors do. Sometimes they go on their own path and do their own thing. And Godzilla Minus One, from what I've heard, has very impressive visual effects, and from all the clips that I've seen from the film, it is very impressive. So I actually do think it has a good chance of getting in here. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that's been getting in everywhere. And I think Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 gets that 5th slot because they really appreciate practical effects and stunt work in a way. And this is just going to be an example of that. Tenet won Best Visual Effects a few years ago, even though that was practically all practical effects. And I think we're going to see that with Mission Impossible with a nomination. 6, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the Visual Effects Society nomination, had some people convinced that it might get a nomination, and it could. But let's be real, the visual effects in Indiana Jones are very shoddy sometimes, and they're using all of these tricks to kind of hide how shoddy they are. Sure, the Academy don't always pick on merit, and you're going to see that with some of these categories. But I just don't think it's strong enough to get a nomination. Best Production Design, Barbie, Poor Things, Oppenheimer, and Killers of the Flower Moon, I think are all locked in. It's the 5th slot. That is interesting. We have a battle between Asteroid City, Saltburn, and Napoleon, and all 3 of these have a good chance of getting in. Now, I was pretty disappointed a few years ago when The French Dispatch got snubbed for production design, but I'm hoping that they right their wrongs this year and give Asteroid City the nomination. It has got a Critics' Choice nomination and an ADG nomination, so it does have a little bit of a package to get into the Academy Awards as a nominee for production design. I think that would be an excellent pick, and I would be psyched if Asteroid City gets at least 1 nomination. Saltburn could definitely get in. It has a similar package as Asteroid City, and Napoleon, it could just be the thing that they love in terms of production design and costume design. A lot of the guilds, it did pretty well on some of these shortlists, and it could be the one to get in. Best Sound is a pretty interesting category as well. I think Oppenheimer and Maestro are probably going to be locks. The Killer I have at number 3 because I think the sound is just that impressive alongside the editing, and I'm kind of hoping that it does show up here. I think Killers of the Flower Moon has an excellent shot of getting in, and at 5 I have The Zone of Interest, just because it seems like it does have a very effective use of sound. 6, I do have Ferrari. That is a possibility that it gets in, but we'll have to wait and see. I think Ferrari isn't the most loved movie, and if the Academy loved it enough, they might give Penelope Cruz a nomination, as well as giving Ferrari a sound nomination. I do think if Ferrari gets a sound nomination, Penelope Cruz is almost a certified lock for a nomination. Best Original Score. So I'm not very confident with some of these picks, but the top 3 I definitely am. Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Killers of the Flower Moon definitely getting in. The Boy and the Heron I have at number 4. Now that's a bit of a risky pick, especially since films like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse have actually been doing quite well. But I think they're going to go with The Boy and the Heron and really send off Miyazaki's final film with a couple of nominations, this being one of them. And 5, I have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, even though that hasn't picked up any precursors, because the Academy love John Williams. For original song, I am pretty confident in this 5. So I'm Just Ken and What Was I Made For will be the 2 Barbie songs that get in. I think I'm Just Ken is actually the front runner. It needed to at least win one thing, and it did at the Critics' Choice, while What Was I Made For won at the Golden Globes. I think the Academy prefers the song to be really integrated into the movie, and I think I'm Just Ken is a little bit more than What Was I Made For, as there's a whole dance sequence designed around that song. Or What Was I Made For is kind of playing in the background while an emotional moment is happening in the movie. And because of that, I do think I'm Just Ken just edges out What Was I Made For as the front runner. I'm really pulling for It Never Went Away from American Symphony to get a nomination. I think the Academy's love for Jon Batiste might pull through here with a documentary nomination and an original song nomination. And I'd be fine with that. I love that documentary, and I'd be so happy if it picked up some noms. Number 4, I have The Fire Inside from Flamin' Hot, and I'm going to tell you why this is a lock. This is the Diane Warren song, okay? She is an annual invite. I don't even see it as a nomination. They're just inviting her to the party afterwards. That's what it feels like, because it doesn't feel like Diane Warren is really ever a serious contender to win. Her song can just be from a movie that you have never heard of, and then it just randomly pops up. And this is the song that she had a hand in writing, so I do think Flamin' Hot is a very strong contender for a nomination and has no chance at winning. And then 5, I have Road to Freedom from Rustin, because it's been popping up everywhere, and the Academy just love these types of songs. Best costume design, I'm pretty confident here, so we've got Barbie at number 1 as the front runner. I think the Critics' Choice win kind of convinced me that it was the front runner. But Poor Things could pick up some wins in the future and really make itself the front runner. I do think it's a strong contender, and that's why it's at number 2. Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese movies of late have gotten nominations. The Irishman did, even though there wasn't anything crazy with the costume design here. With Killers of the Flower Moon, there are a few more interesting choices with costume design that I think really shine in the movie, and I think will make it deserving of that nomination. 4, I have The Color Purple, just one of the craft categories that I do think it gets in and has done just enough, I think. And 5, I have Napoleon, because it has been showing up everywhere beforehand, and I just think that out of all of the nominations that Napoleon could get, I'm the most confident in costume design. For best makeup and hairstyling, I think Maestro is definitely the front runner, with it being just so transformative. The Academy just absolutely loves that stuff. So definitely the front runner there. Number 2, I have Poor Things. Once again, some very showy makeup. At number 3, I have Oppenheimer. There is some heavy use of makeup near the end of the film that I think just pulls it through and gets it that nomination. 4, I have Golda for a similar reason that I have Maestro. It's a very transformative form of makeup. And even though the film isn't that acclaimed, it's just enough to get it that nomination. And 5, I'm going for a risk here. I'm going for The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Just because if you look at it just by itself, it is kind of impressive what they're going for with the makeup, even though that film is considered to be pretty mediocre. But Suicide Squad won an Academy Award in this category, so anything's possible here. I'm not going to go into too much detail with the short categories. I'm just going to give you what I think is the front runner, and that's it, because I've basically gone with the Gold Derby 5 because I just don't know enough. So number 1, I'm going with the ABCs of Book Banning for Best Documentary Short. Best Animated Short, I'm going for Once Upon a Studio as the frontrunner. And for Live Action Short, and God, I kind of really hope this wins, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, because it would be amazing if Wes Anderson won an Oscar. Even if it was for this short film, I'd be pretty psyched about that. And those are my predictions for the Academy Award nominations. I'm sure I'm going to get some wrong here. They really like to do their own thing, and there are some nominations that just kind of completely come out of nowhere. And that's what makes the Academy Awards so exciting. They usually make some really great choices, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing what they're going to drum up as the nominations this year. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.